Have you ever been in a situation where waiting felt impossible? Like you're praying, you're hoping, but nothing's happening. And you're thinking, God, did you forget me? Well, meet Sarah, a woman who knew all about waiting and waiting and waiting. Her story is about more than patience, it's about what happens when faith and frustration collides, and how God shows up in ways so unexpected you might just laugh out loud, literally. Let's rewind to Genesis 12. God calls Abraham, Sarah's husband, and tells him to leave everything behind to go to a land he will show him. And not just that, God promises Abraham he will be the father of a great nation. Sounds exciting, right? Except for one major detail. Sarah couldn't have children. Genesis 11:30 says it plainly. Sarah was barren and she had no child. So this whole father of nations thing must have sounded crazy. But Sarah and Abraham obeyed. They packed up their lives and went, holding on to the promise that God would somehow make it happen. And then, nothing. Like, nothing. No baby. Years turned into decades, and still no sign of this great nation God had promised. Can you imagine Sarah's frustration? Every passing year must have felt like a broken promise. It's the kind of waiting that makes you question everything. By the time we get to Genesis 16, Sarah decides to take matters into her own hands, and she tells Abraham to have a child with her servant, her maid servant, Hagar. And guess what? Hagar gets pregnant, but instead of solving the problem, it creates a whole new set of issues. Jealousy, bitterness, and tension takes over their home. Their home literally became a reality TV show. It's a reminder of what happens when we try to help God's plans instead of trusting His timing. Proverbs 3 verse 5 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding." But leaning on her own understanding led to chaos. But here's the beautiful part: God did not abandon His promise. He didn't say, "Well, Sarah, you messed this up. Forget it." Instead, in Genesis 18, God shows up again and He tells Abraham, this time next year, Sarah will have a son. And Sarah, she laughed. Like, she laughed. Genesis 18:12 says, she laughed to herself and thought, after I am worn out and my Lord is old, will I now have this pleasure? Oh my God, she really thought to herself. She was like, she's old, she's got the gray hair. I mean, she's 90. She's supposed to be thinking about retirement, probably knitting some things, and she would have a child. She laughed. Her laughter wasn't just disbelief. It was the laugh of someone who had been disappointed so many times that hope felt too risky, right? But God heard her. God heard her, and He asked, is anything too hard for the Lord? I repeat, is anything too hard for the Lord? That's the question we all need to ask ourselves when life feels impossible. 1 year later, in Genesis 21, the impossible happened. Sarah, at 90 years old, gave birth to a son. They named him Isaac, which means laughter. What a poetic justice. The very thing she laughed at in disbelief became her greatest joy. Wow. Sarah's story is a powerful reminder of God's faithfulness. Even in her doubts, her mistakes, and her impatience, God kept His promise. Romans 4:20-21 talks about Abraham's faith, saying he did not waver through unbelief regarding the promise of God, but was strengthened in his faith and gave glory to God, being fully persuaded that God had power to do what He had promised. And that's what we can hold on to: God's promises. God's promises don't depend on our perfection, they depend on His power. He doesn't need us to be all perfect for Him to do His will. So if you're in a season of waiting, waiting for a breakthrough, waiting for a prayer to be answered, Remember the story of Sarah. God hasn't forgotten you. His timing may not be what you expect, but it is always perfect and it is always just on time. Just on time. And when He fulfills His promise, oh, your laughter of doubt will turn into a laugh of pure joy, because with God, nothing is impossible. God works with the word impossible. He doesn't work with possible. He works with the word impossible. That is why we call him the impossibility specialist. He is the impossibility specialist. That is who he is, and that is what he will forever be. So whenever you're feeling down, please remember the story of Sarah. I love you and have a great day. Love you.